All right, are we ready, Matthias?
One moment. All right. And we are live. Welcome to
All
our
right, are
second
we ready,
episode of
Matthias?
Public Participation Amplified. My name is Matias Lemos Castillo. I am your host. I'm really excited to have you here and welcome you out to the space. Our hook here, our question is always, what if public participation wasn't just a checkbox, but the most powerful tool we have to shape better decisions, stronger communities, and real trust? This is why we created Public Participation Amplified. I'm joined today by the wonderful Jasmine Turk. My name is Matias Lemos Castillo, and our guest today is the one and only Annette Miller.
Public Participation Amplified.
Try to start with
My
a little
name
bit
is
more of a
Matias
fun
Lemos Castillo. I am your host.
ambience. All right. A little bit about Annette Miller. Annette's career spans decision-making roles across state and local government and is the executive in the private sector. She brings 25 years of strong professional policy and analytical skills in a wide network of community, government, and business relationships, especially in Dane County, diverse population. Annette launched EQT by Design to focus on developing diverse, inclusive, sustainable strategies and public engagement, equitable community development projects, and organizational culture change management. EQT by Design does this work by engaging the community in equity center efforts, disrupting the changing inequity policies, systems, and structures, while consulting and modeling to provide concrete action steps to increase impact and facilitate change. I'm very happy to welcome Annette to the space. Today, we're going to be talking about a really exciting topic. We're going to be exploring what AI is, what is it doing to reshape the landscape in civic engagement and democracy. Jasveen, anything you want to add to set the stage for us before we pass it over to Annette?
Yeah, I love this topic. I'm so super excited to have this conversation because I feel like I work on a college campus. I'm hearing about AI all day, every day. And so the way that this intersects with community engagement and public participation is such an important conversation that I'm glad that we can be a part of today. And I would just love for you, Annette, to just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how AI plays a role in the work that you do.
Yeah. So just thank you both for inviting me into this space. Just a little nugget. I remember when I got certified by IAP2, and I feel like this is like full circle. I feel like the centering the voice of the community is so important, and I felt like my grounding came from IAP2. Like IAP2 helped me really think about what is the promise to the public, and I didn't realize it then, but I've come to realize it now, like in my business, how much that was such a foundational like grounding, like what would you call it, North Star. And whenever I get a little bit confused, I always think about, what are my roots around engagement? And so I think talking about public participation and talking about engagement from an AI perspective is such a future forward topic, because I think we all need to slow down and really start thinking about this, because AI is happening quickly and rapidly. And when things are happening quickly and rapidly, we need to take a moment to sort of get out of the stream of things and step to the side and have a dialogue, have a conversation, and really think about impact, and who it's impacting and how it's impacting it. And if we need to do some disruption, we need to slow down so that we can think about what does disruption look like. So just thank you so much, for bringing me into this space. And I hope that gives you a little bit of an understanding of who I am. I really am a policy person who's interested in engagement and belonging of community, like just plain and simple. And I really want to come to engagement from the perspective of the community. And I really feel like I'm a bridge. I'm here as a bridge to help curate the voice of the community, not to disrupt it, not to displace it, not to get in the way of it, but really to be another doorway, another window, another opportunity for how community can come to understand what they want and what they desire. And hopefully I'm a part of making that come true. I think when we ask the question about how does AI play a role, I will tell you that I'm probably at the beginning part of that conversation, quite frankly. And this is no lie, how AI sort of came to me is I was going to my chiropractor, and she asked me as she's adjusting me, she's asking, so do you use AI in your work? And I was just like, wait, what? Like you're asking me about AI and how do I use that in my work? And the first time she asked me, I was like lost. And then the second time she asked me again, and I was like, you know what? This person is really curious and they're trying to understand AI. They're trying to understand the world of AI and where it's happening. And I think for me, that's when I realized that I need to also start thinking about this and taking this seriously too. And so I would say that how we use AI, I think we've been using AI and we didn't know it, which I call that the Google or the internet or the interwebs jokingly. That is the backbone of AI. So I've used it, to if I have a question, I go to the internet to ask the question. I honestly just recently used AI for in a business way in that I now use it for my calendaring and I use it for when I'm editing work as additional support for me in terms of completing business work. I also have seen it used to help be creative. So I feel like that's been really important for us. And then I just think it's, I feel like AI could be a lot. It almost could take up every aspect of how we see the world. And I think that that's also why this conversation is important, because my question is, should it? And should it, and what place does it have? So that's where
Hmm.
that's my unfolding of AI, how it sat with me.
Oh, Jasmine, you are muted.
And I think those are great questions, as well as like, when you are using it, how you use it, when you use it, what tools you use, and
Mhm.
what are the pitfalls to be aware of, and what are the gray areas that kind of need to be worked through a little bit more.
I agree. And I want to just highlight something you added in that, like, we're all at the beginning. I agree 100%. I think we're still emerging in what AI really is and understanding it, right? Like, AI is less than 10 years old, maybe. I want to say still a baby in comparison. And where is it going to be in the next couple of years? Who knows? Because the same AI we have now is not the AI we had 5 years ago. And 5 years from
Right.
now, it will be something completely different. So really excited to see how it grows, how it shapes the world and that we're all living right now.
Right. And if I may add, I would say that I think it also comes at a time when we have concerns about authentic data and information. The backbone of how we get data, the source of it, the truth telling of it, actually, in my opinion, makes the conversation around AI even more critical, because it requires that the user of it also be ask questions, and not just trust. You have to think about the source. You have to think about privacy. You have to think about impact. It does open the door for a lot more deeper thinking, too. So it is going to make the exploration and use of it interesting.
Mm. You mentioned data, so I want to use that as a segue for that second question around, misinformation and the,
Mhm.
ethical responsibility. So how do public participation practitioners draw the line between fact and AI generated fiction when technology can instantly create sophisticated misinformation? And what is our ethical responsibility in combating as practitioners?
Is this for me too?
That's for
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Oh, I see. I kick it off first. I was looking at Yasmin like, oh, I really want to hear what she has to say. She's like,
We'll
nope, you
comment
first.
after you.
She's like, nope, you first. Um, so I think, just sort of bridging in my last comment about, trust, source, authenticity. I do think that it does mean that we, as the user of AI, probably need to really think more deeply and more comprehensively about ethics, um, and really do some work to try to understand um, safety, right? And privacy. I know as a firm who is working with community, I have a lot of different types of community members that I engage with, and I want to protect them. And that's always been a premise of our work anyway. But now I think about it even more, in terms of like, what do people have access to electronically, right? And if we use, so where I know that uh, AI and privacy has come up is we are developing an engagement platform. And one of the things that we've been really thinking about is having a very bright firewall, so that people can trust that the information that they give us and that we're asking for, so that we can make sure that we're representative and inclusive and we're really hearing from all different walks of life of the community. While people trust us to give it to us, we also want to give trust back to say that no one can access this information from us. And so then we're talking to the developers and asking them, can you give us proof of how confidential and how private this is? What are you using for, firewalls, to ensure that people know that their information is safe? Um, and and I feel like that is a, an obligation that I have, that the community trusts me. And in order to build trust, I want to create an environment of trust. So I have to ask questions of the people that I work with, or that EQT brings into its space, to make sure that they are creating a trusted space. So I feel like that's new for us, is to be asking that question, because you almost it feels like a hospital, when we talk about HIPAA compliance. I feel like I'm having to think about, privacy, because I have information about people that, I don't want to cause harm, right? So I do feel like I have an ethical responsibility. I would say that I think people need to be aware of that and need to add that to their toolkit, is thinking about ethical responsibility. And I think with ethical responsibility, that does get you to also think about misinformation. And so that's where we're thinking about, well, where is the source of this data? Where is this coming from? Who developed it? Who created it? And I think that that's also where there's already been a conversation around giving credit to where your sources come from. We talk a lot, in the equity world, we talk about misappropriation, and we also talk about extraction. And so I feel like if you are trying to authentically be open and aware about misappropriation and extraction, I feel like then you also can then do diligence in that misinformation too, right? Because if you're doing that work, then hopefully that's also reducing the ability to support misinformation, because you're asking questions and you're being aware. And I also think that means that you have to open up your network. So if you don't have a deep network of IT people or technology people or digital people, that to be thinking about that, because when we're talking about AI, like you said, it's happening whether we want it to or not. We owe it to ourselves. And this is, again, going back to the ethical responsibility, making sure we know as much as we can. And part of that is making sure we have a network of people that we can talk to and learn from, which is, again, why this podcast is important, because I feel like we're offering a way to think about it.
Yeah, and I think those points you made are really important about privacy, about equity and bias, and that, AI systems, they reflect biases in training data, right? That's just the way it is, that the data that they were trained on might not be the ones that take into account everything. And also authenticity, over automation can make engagement feel impersonal. So that's something to think about often. And what you said about transparency, communities should know, where information is coming from when they're interacting with AI systems instead of practitioners directly. I think those are all things to think about when connecting and engaging.
Yeah. I also think, there's already been a discourse around equity in technology. So to me, I feel like we need to then stay on top of it and go how and keep following that. And I know early on in my career that they used to say, ask yourself why, like 3, 4, 5, 6 times, right? So that you can really get as close to the root of your understanding as you can. And I feel like in this space, we need to do the same thing. Because where I feel like misinformation can come from AI, first of all, AI was created by humans. And just as a refresher, humans are perfectly imperfect. And so that means humans make mistakes, which means that AI also then is embedded with that fundamentally, in my personal opinion. I mean, even though someone's going to try and tell me that, AI is supposed to be perfect, there is no such thing as perfect, because we can't even model perfection. So whatever we think perfection is, there's still a blind spot, is going to be my point. And then we always have to ask the question, perfection for who and about what? right? And so when I think about using AI like in work, I always think about the concept that the thing about AI is it's a 0 and 1, okay? It's an algorithm. People and ideas are nuances, and it's 3D or 5D. And so, I'll be curious about how zeros and ones can be turned into something that's nuanced. And so when we think about using AI to help us do work, I think about how it can miss things. I even miss things when I'm talking to people. Why? Because there's a nuance. Because humans have a dictionary that they use to communicate. And it changes from person to person, culture to culture. And so I just feel like, this is going to be the risk is when we use AI to summarize or filter, what is it filtering out and what is it filtering in? I see AI as a tool. And so it does bring me back to the ethical responsibility, not to keep, going on about this, but I just think that these are the true nuances that we have to be thinking about. There's a lot on the line.
And fortunately for most of the conversation that I hear around AI is I don't hear that it is held out as perfection, but that it is in the beginning stages and there are many iterations to come. So there's a lot of opportunity to develop and influence kind of the content and the way that it is framed to be more inclusive and to be more equitable. So at least from the conversations I hear, it is, and at the beginning stages of development. So there's still so much more to come. So we still have yet to see the capacity and the capabilities that come with AI. And with institutions and community groups using AI for advocacy and for organizing, I'd love to hear your thoughts on who controls the core civic narrative and how does that power shift affect traditional engagement models?
I guess where I'll go with that is, and I've been sitting on that one. That's to me a hard question, quite frankly, and it's hard because I believe where AI can be truly helpful is as a tool, right? That it is a tool, and that I think the other thing that we need to understand is that I bring in the idea of perfection because I think that the premise of technology has been that it was this idea to be better, and to be more accurate. And I think where I want to go with it is that I don't think, for me, that wouldn't be the goal. The goal is to help and to add and to expand reach, to open doors and provide opportunities. So when I think about how community groups can use AI for advocacy and organizing, I see AI as a positive tool that allows community to be able to do things. It allows them to have a longer reach and maybe even a more expansive reach, because it's a tool that adds on to that builds up their capacity, right? But then I also think it at the same time becomes messy. because I think it depends. How is it being used? How is AI being used in its reach protocols? Um, and how is the I think the other part of the conversation is when we talk about equity and inequity, we're talking about structural systems, and AI is a structural system. It is a structural construct. And so, how do we then understand where inequity is embedded in a structural construct? And so, I feel like that's what we need to be slowing down and asking ourselves questions about, especially since there's already been narrative and discourse around the fact that AI might already inherently be perpetuating structural inequity. So I feel like you have to have a conversation then about if as a community group, you would have to be asking the question, like, is it, is this, are we using this in a way that helps people? Are we using this in a way that continues to build trust, transparency, and reach? We're going to be called on to, do our own equity analysis, um, to make sure that how we're using this is being used in the way that we want. I think that institutions are going to do what they always do, and that means that we then need to keep pushing, poking, and prodding, and asking questions to make sure that we continue the work of making sure that we deconstruct, the inequity that is in this. But I think that the community groups also need to be thinking about it too. And I think in the past, maybe we always thought it was a them problem, but it's an our. I feel like this conversation around AI, and maybe all conversations always were, it's an our problem, but it felt more visible, pointing outward. But I think that we have to ask ourselves, are we too a part of it? And if we are, what can we do?
You dropped so many nuggets of wisdom there, and I love it. And one that stood out for me was really on the um, really how our communities using it, and the combating it with this notion where it's being created to replace humans, right? Really, when it is the
Mm-hmm.
tool, right? It's not it's like the hammer situation, right? You use the hammer to build a house. You don't tell the hammer, hey, go build a house for me. You still need that human component to
Mm-hmm.
utilize the tool and be able to help you see the gaps that you might not be able to see with your own eyes, and even with the reciprocity there too, fill in the gaps that the AI itself might not be able to see, right? Because humans are complex, and when we're working with community, with government, as practitioners, it's really our role is to be able to see the whole picture, and these tools help us fill in the gaps because we can't capture everything all at once in the moment. So I lean in strong with you, and AI is a tool. It should support the work. It shouldn't be the do all and be all of the work. And I don't know if it can actually replace work where it's really people-centered, right? That people-centered nuance is still going to be up to the individuals, up to the groups, because they understand the people and they understand the community, the language. I think about the language a lot, and especially as a native Spanish speaker, AI in Spanish is still not the same thing as AI in English, and there's a lot of discrepancies. Some of the words, the way that it writes is so um, robotic, for lack of a better word, and you can feel it, right? You can see it when someone's writing something and they're just like, oh. this was clearly AI because no one uses these sentences or these words in this way. If a human writes it, there's more of that, and even that to the leading to that perfection, the imperfection that we are around writing and how we write, right? Just being able to see someone made a mistake in a post, in a writing prompt, and even in an essay, right, is such a breath of fresh air in a way right now because so much of it is so polished and perfect that makes you see like, was this really written by the human or did they get help? And the getting the help is fine too. You just gotta cite it as well. So just wanted to name those things. I think there's a lot of emerge and as practitioners, it's really seeing it as the tool, but not the ends to the mean.
Right.
I'm curious.
Well, and I think,
Hmm?
oh, go ahead. Yep.
No, no, go ahead.
Part of the question was traditional engagement models. And I
Mm,
think that thing that we need to poke at too, because, community changes, it evolves, it grows. And I feel like we have to be careful about this idea of um, um, traditional, because in and of itself, traditional for who, right? Like our the to me, the premise of engagement is to make sure that there are many channels and many ways in which people can um, engage, have an opinion, have a perspective, be heard. And I think that what we I think there always should be a power shift, quite frankly. I think what we need to be checking is it equitable? Is it making space? Like I talk about how there's, you know, 4 generations in the workforce. So, is there space? Are we making space for those different ways in which those 4 different generations are able to engage? And so, if our young generation or a component of our young generation is using technology, I would not want that to be a barrier when we talk about traditional engagement, right? And at the same time, if we're talking about our older, community members, and I am stereotyping right now, I just want to name that because I'm saying that young people use technology and perhaps hinting that older people don't, which is actually not true. But just for purposes of this example, if there are older people who aren't as comfortable with the use of technology and they would prefer to call, or write a letter or go to a space physically, um, that also, it could be a negative, right? If we were to fully swing towards things being um, digitized, which I think that was one of the things that was starting to manifest when we thought about COVID and the use of technology and going virtual, and people no longer, because of COVID protocols not being available in person. I feel like a lot of these questions, or um, that critical moment and critical mass is really what's driving a lot of what we're talking about today, because we got a taste, right, of what this could look like for us. And I think it's giving us an opportunity to slow down and to have these conversations.
mm,
But I wanted to poke a little bit on that traditional engagement, because again, we should even ask ourselves, what is traditional? Um,
mm.
right? I think it's more about how are we making sure that all ways are welcome? And do we have a capacity to hold all ways, right?
And that's a field that changes and it moves like water. So as practitioners, right, we have to be able to adapt and move. And, if the community's going left, all right, we're going left with them and right. Um, Wow, I appreciate that so much. Thank you, Annette. And I want to bring us to more of the equity and accessibility portion for the conversation before we start closing out. But we mentioned equity already, and there's talks about AI bringing this digital divide in a way. So how is AI currently acting as a bridge to increase that participation that we've been talking about, or even creating new layers of division because it serves a certain groups over others? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's a great question. I do think it's a both and.
Hmm.
I think I saw how it could be a bridge. But I think again, when we're talking about engagement, we always have to go back to how are we reaching people and how are we getting the information to them so that they understand that here is another way in which they can engage. I I think for me, and thinking about the work that we're doing, when we were thinking about the engagement platform that we've been building, we're wanting to use technology as a bridge. And I also feel like I'm also pushing myself and even the team to make sure that this doesn't mean that this is the only way in which we are talking to community, that we are still using the other tools that we also have, which is going to where people are, making sure that we are sending out, information in places and spaces where we think they can find it, um, developing relationships with people who have relationships with people who have relationships with people who have relationships that we still use we use all the methods and that this is a way to add a method. I know when I was thinking about it as a bridge, I was feeling like I wasn't being inclusive because I worried about people who worked different shifts, or I thought about people who they have time constraints and they may not be able to be at certain places at certain times. And so I was wanting to create a 24/7 methodology that meant that whenever a person was ready to talk and to share and to give insight, that they could do it on their own time. So that's how I'm wanting to use AI and technology as a bridge. But I do see how it can be a divider as well. And, I think that that's probably where my growth edge needs to continue, is just to think about that, because I think I've been so heavily focused on how it can be a bridge that I
Hmm.
haven't yet, you know, explored like how it can. I mean, I understand intellectually how it could be a divider, but I haven't like felt it, right? Like I haven't had someone come to me and say, you use technology and your use of technology prevented me from, right? Like I haven't had that experience yet. So I feel like that's something that, I'm waiting to experience because I know it will happen.
Yeah, and I think about all the ways that it does help as well. When I think about how you can be available anytime, you can have those, opportunities for people to participate in the way that's convenient for them, when it's convenient for them, at any location, anytime. I mean, I feel like there's so much more access than there was previously. And also when I think about trying to have that social listening and public sentiment, AI
Hmm.
tools make that so much more possible. Otherwise, we're so limited
Mhm.
on the sites that we search and the places that we go to get that information, and really having those tools that can read through thousands of comments and give you those themes and really get you know, that public sentiment in a way that previously was just not possible, especially for smaller organizations or organizations with limited staff and resources. So I feel like that really does open up a lot of opportunity and I think about even just creating um you know, creating things to go out. We have translation tools that are so much better now than they've ever been. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and as a person who also is bilingual and, you know, reads another language and has many times come across things that were not proofread when done, um, I really appreciate now I read things that have been translated and it is so much better than it ever was before. And it makes information so much more accessible, especially for organizations with limited resources to at least have that first draft done
Yep.
um, through AI and then just have it looked over by somebody who can make sure that it's there, you know. And I feel like also there's an opportunity for faster communication, getting the word out, making it more personalized and really directed towards your audience. And when I think about some of the public participation or community engagement software that's out there now, I feel like it really makes the administrative burden of connecting with communities a lot less, which allows staff to actually be out in community a lot more and be a lot more present in that way, especially for smaller teams or lower resource teams. I feel like that goes a long way in
Mm-hmm.
enhancing the connection with community. I feel like it really comes down to um, having that human trust plus AI efficiency together to make for better public participation, really bringing those two things together. Like you build those relationships with people who have relationships and other relationships, but you just bring in the efficiency as well with AI. I feel like that's a great opportunity to be in this time with those resources.
You stole the words right out of my mouth, Jasmine. And I love the AI plus the human trust, right? That's really the piece, right? It's a two-part. It's not just the human, and we have our hammer as practitioners that can help us be in the community, have those conversations, listen deeply, and go back and say, "Hey, was there anything that I missed?" I think a lot about like the voice recording AIs and the ones that can kind of pick up on, certain themes and highlight them for you. You can do that easier and then across a wide range of conversations, be able to say, oh, this topic actually emerged a number of times. We should dig deeper into and learn. And it also tells about the times that we're on, right? Like in the world that we live in right now, housing, transportation, access to food, those are themes that come up and the AI can pick up faster and say, actually, this has been over a course of time emerging and it's important. And as practitioners, how do we lean into it and turn it into action using the data that we have and tell the story that's needed to tell?
Yeah, I think it's something I want to throw in to because I'm thinking about the compilation of all the questions, and I do feel that in a very simplistic way, the things that we're worried about are things that we'll always have to worry about, right? That
Mm,
what AI is bringing to the table is not new. You know, the idea that bypassing channels, right? To me, that's the squeaky wheel gets the oil. We know about that. Like, how do we make sure that the squeaky wheel isn't the only one that gets the oil, right? Um,
mm,
Thinking about access, we've always been thinking about access because that's really fundamentally what engagement is about, right? Is about access. So I feel like what's changing and shifting is the way in which we talk about it and the way in which we think about it. But fundamentally, at its core, we're talking about the same thing, right? But we have to think about the solutions differently because we're talking about we're adding tools into the space. And so now we have to be knowledgeable about those tools in order to understand how the tool, even though it can be a bridge, it also can, how do we also make sure it doesn't work against us, right? That's always, whenever we introduce something new, we always have to be thinking about what's great about it, and then also how can it be what's not great about it, right? And so when I think about AI, as a bridge or divider, a couple things that I think about also is I think what AI has the potential to do is to shave corners, right? And what I mean
Mm.
by that is we could become more rooted in what we think is the template for how we understand the world, right? So when we think about using AI to help us write better, well, why is the way that we write wrong, right? Or not good? And so one of the things that I think we have an opportunity here in AI is that because AI is smart, we can actually add more things to the AI uh, rubric to widen and broaden what it means to be good, right? Or to be better. So, Yasmin, you were talking about dual language, or multilingual. We need to be adding that into the construct of AI. So instead of it, and I only, this is when my head will probably explode, but I'm not multilingual, but I also feel like I'm very much a multilingual ally. Like I understand sort of the bones of it because I do have different language in my household that I grew up with, even though I don't actively speak it. And I was in countries where I heard other languages. So it's sort of in me, even though I don't, speak it. And I guess what I'm thinking about with AI is how AI is a language ultimately. And so how do we add more to the language construct so that we can include more, so that there can be more? So rather than trying to, when we're talking about be efficient, let's be inclusive, right? And I feel like where there is a blind spot is when we think about multilingual. I especially in the United States, where is AI using English? What if AI was using many languages, right? Like, so when it is
Mm.
assessing and analyzing, part of its assessment and analyzing is in it now have, because it's has so much unlimited capacity, now we can put in other languages that before, as a human, and especially in the United States, many of us, are speaking English. What if we were able to add these other languages? And then how would that shift and change, like, how we view the work? Like, I feel like that could be really interesting. Right now, it feels like a barrier. Like multilingual is a barrier a lot of times, just because we're using English as the base. And so, and I think that speaks to literacy. When we talk about, how can AI, you know, we talk about how it could be a divider. I think it's this. I think literacy might be where it could get complicated, um, because what gets included versus what's excluded, and then how do we talk about it, um, in terms of access, right? Like we can't have technology be like we talk about when we write, it has to be at a certain grade level. And I think that we need to be thinking about that when we talk about technology and the use of technology when we deploy it. What, is a divider? Um, do we have to have, so I don't know if you can put a grade level to to technology. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm probably making this more messy, but I'm just thinking about what we're using currently for guardrails and how those guardrails might be applied when we talk about
Hmm.
AI. And then I'm also thinking about how we could actually expand, where I feel like the idea of multilingual has been such a barrier. And again, I'm speaking US, and I'll even go as far as to say Midwest, like a barrier. How could AI be a opportunity to be able to change and shift that, where it isn't only English that's included in how things get assessed and reviewed? I don't know. I took it a weird way. I apologize.
I love it. And it's really, I think at the core of it is really how to expand the access, how to expand the possibilities with it, and as it's getting released, not all the tools are created equally, right? There's different levels that might emerge, and some might be more of a level one. You can do it for your simple translation, uh, what's it called? Refine the phrases, word checks, spelling checks, right? And then there's some other tools that might let you do more with it. Yet, the consistent theme is, can they do it in that same things as level one, right? And you're adding, now you can build code, now you can build apps, now you can build businesses, right? So there's a lot of crazy scenarios there. Yet, Wes is still only in that, if you're in that level four, but not only doing it in English, maybe you need to go back to level one and say, hey, can you actually do it in multiple language? So it expand access. And then from the way that I took it, actually, from a business perspective, it expands business because then you can have clientele engage with you in different languages and a language that feels authentic to them, that feels like, oh, actually, this resonates with me and purchase it. Right now, the way that it kind of seen, and maybe it's by design, right? It's just in one language, and
Hmm.
uh, you don't hear more around like the expansion of, yeah, we want to include Spanish, we want to include the Hmong, we want to include these other languages to create equity and create access to all communities to be able to use it. It's, if you know English, you're able to use it. Or I think about like my parents, for example, would they be able to understand how to use AI as it is now, or would it be difficult with,
Hmm.
very basic English knowledge, primarily in Spanish, right? Or thinking outside of the US, how does the AI look there, and is it as fast and growing as it is here? Those are conversations that often don't get heard as much and should have, because maybe the AI again that we have now, it's much more powerful, or actually might be not as powerful as an AI in a different part of the world, just because they have had those conversations and
Hmm.
those thought points, and creating a grading level for it too. I was thinking about like a reading level or something. You mentioned the reading level, but something that allows you
Yeah,
to kind of see this is the intensity of it before you engage with it, so you can know what you're
right.
walking into.
Yeah, I just think when we talk about practical and low cost, I feel like practical
Mm.
means that we may need to be thinking about some kind of level, right? That ensures access, right? Um, so that it's not so complicated that it keeps people out of it. It actually allows people to be part of it. Um, and I think in terms of the language, I want people to think about that, because I do feel like part of the blind spot is that I know me as a English speaker, that is how I only know how to understand the world and um and communicate. But I have great admiration for people who can speak two, three, four different languages. And there are things that can be imagined and thought of in other languages that can't be thought of in English because there is no word for it or not the right word. And when we think about intelligence and when we think about creativity, just think about if AI would be able to create access in the other direction, right? I just think that that could be kind of cool. And it expands sort of our understanding of what I think it could really fundamentally change how we understand life, people, place, access, engagement. And I think like it would be more inclusive, especially when we talk about from an engagement perspective. If we could be more inclusive of those ideas that don't easily translate, but people could see it because it connects to them. They're like, "Oh, I see my culture, I see my language in AI," and that
Mhm.
hooks them, right? And you know, other people could have that experience with that person, right? I think that could be pretty powerful. So I do think it still brings us back to how AI can be a bridge rather than, I do think that AI can be a bridge. I think we always have to continuously think about um, where it can be a divider. But I think that that's always been there. That's always been the work. I don't think that that's ever going to change because, as I said, opening up, we are perfectly imperfect people. So we will always be thinking about, you know, how does it work well and what are its limitations?
Which is a perfect segue to our last question, which is, what are you optimistic about with the use of AI in public participation?
That it can be a bridge and that it is going to be a bridge and that it will be used in that way. I'm very optimistic about that. I see the potential.
Great. And what about you, Matthias?
I love it.
Are you
Oh
excited about
man.
AI? Are you all in?
I'm halfway there. I think there's still the human component, right? I'll meet it halfway, but I'm excited. I think it's a tool nonetheless, and one that we need to keep exploring and shaping and teaching. I think the piece that doesn't get talked about is how to teach people how to use it. We're kind of going at it blindly, and when you buy something new, you have two options, right? You can read the instruction manual and be like, okay, I'm gonna go step by step, or I'm just gonna go figure it out. And I'm more of that second type of person of I'll name it, and I think we're all kind of just stumbling through it and figuring out like, oh, you can do this, you can do this, or oh, I made a mistake. Then we go back to the instruction and you're like, oh, let me figure it out. So, how do we teach AI to community members to make it accessible, to make it part of their day-to-day life, but use it in a way that's also not leading them into, ads or consume something. So,
Right.
that's where I'm leaning. But
Yeah.
overall, hopeful. How about you,
I think
Jasmine?
also I worry about that too, about the slop, right? How do we make sure that the information that we want to share is not overridden by misinformation, right? That's just as
Hmm.
easily available. And I think that's something that I have optimism for the iterations of AI going forward, that hopefully we'll have better tools to not just get information, but to get good information. So I'm excited for that. I also am excited for the access that comes with new technology and this technology specifically. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Annette, for joining us today, and Matthias for being such a great conversation leader. And thank you for anybody who joined us as well. This episode of the IAP2 podcast is our second in our series. We hope today's conversation gave you practical insight and new perspective on meaningful public participation. To stay connected, visit iap2.org, follow IAP2 on social media, and consider becoming a member of your local chapter. If you found this episode valuable, be sure to subscribe and share it with a colleague. And until next time, keep showing up, keep listening, and keep building better decisions together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.